because there's no question that we need close relationships. We need partnership. There's a lot of research that shows that when we can develop security in a pair relationship, that life goes better.
Welcome to the Audacious Life Podcast, where your host, Stephanie Roberts, welcomes you to listen to women from all walks of life share their stories of finding freedom from abuse. You'll hear experts give you real advice on what you need to do to create hope for your future. Make a plan and see that light at the end of the tunnel. You'll learn how to build yourself up spiritually, mentally, physically, financially, and legally. 1 in 4 women have experienced some form of abuse, and 80% of women who leave abusive relationships go back. It's time to change that statistic and give you the audacious life you've always wanted. A life of freedom, peace, and true joy. Put on your headphones and get ready to be inspired.
Welcome to the Audacious Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Roberts, and I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that today's podcast is a little bit different. I don't know about you, but when I'm doing research for this, I find that any information about people who hurt other people or abuse them or try to control them, I find that there's usually this very black and white scenario where they're labeled and they're kind of put in a box. Like, this is who this person is. Here are their, key characteristics, and they generally don't change. That can be really, really scary if you still have this person in your life. If you don't have any choice but to deal with the person on a regular basis, it's very limiting and also kind of depressing. So today we have a guest who is going to talk about relationships. She's a relationship expert. She's also going to talk about the underlying emotions that cause some of these things that controlling and abusive people do. Not in great detail, but I think what she's going to do is maybe shed some light on the possibilities for all our relationships. And that is something that I hope you will appreciate. And this may give some hope to people who are in those kinds of abusive and controlling relationships that maybe have some potential for growth and change. And, you just never know. So anyway, I would say tune in. There's something for everyone, whether you're with someone or not with someone. There's a way to nurture yourself and kind of make yourself more whole, more happy, and get yourself into a state where you are actually able to participate in a healthy relationship moving forward. And by that, I don't just mean romantic relationships, but just all of your relationships. So something in this one for everyone. So without further ado, just wanted to say thanks again for tuning in. Happy to have you. Would love to have a rating and review on iTunes. So go to Apple iTunes, look for The Audacious Life. If you're listening now, just click review in iTunes. Subscribe and review would be fantastic. And here you go.
This episode is sponsored by Undolus.com. You've taken control of your life this far, so why not take control of your dating too? The choice is yours. Check out Undolus.com. Undolus.com has leveraged the power of the feminine collective. That's right, the sisterhood. There are lots of other women out there like you, and they don't want to date a creepy guy or stalker type. And they don't want you to end up with one either. You'd both rather have the good guy. So maybe that guy who didn't work out for them, he'll be perfect for you. And maybe your dud date is their diamond. Undolus is a place where women can gather, share their thoughts on the men they've spent time dating, whether on a date or a full relationship. Undolus can perform a simple background check too, and cross-reference it with women's ratings to give you a dateability score. How cool is that? So go ahead, check out Undolus.com, Undolus.com. Come on, leave some dirt on your ex and help a sister out. Or rate that guy who was sweet but didn't quite work out for you. Heck, you can even leave a review on your best guy friend, the one who's having trouble finding Mrs. Right. Let's help the good guys float to the top. Use promo code ALIFE and leave 3 reviews to get a free background check. That's ALIFE. You've got power, so let's wield it. Let's use the Feminine Collective, sign up today, rate your date, and let's build this database so we have a safe place to go to find the good guys and start dating again. Go to undolus.com, UNDOLUS.com. All right, well, welcome to the Audacious Life podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Roberts, and today we have Dr. Becca Jorgensen, and she is a relationship doctor, and I will let her explain exactly what she does. So welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.
Well, so what I do is, mostly what I do is I work with couples who are in distress, and I train psychologists, marriage and family therapists, other types of licensed professionals how to do couple therapy. And so I'm in and around and with troubled relationships, relationships in crisis, people after relationship crises are over or trying to heal from relationships. And that's, where that's the environment I'm functioning in all the time, with individual therapy and couple therapy, and then workshops and training events.
Wow, great. Well, then you are just the right person for me to be talking to right now. So we have, for this audience, we have, quite a few people, who are probably trying to get out or manage their way through kind of a broken relationship or an unhealthy, abusive relationship. And then there are plenty of people who are kind of out the other side, whether it's recent or maybe they've been out for years. And just, I guess the main reason why I wanted to have you on was really to discuss that healing process, and also how do you move into a healthy relationship after you've been through something that was abusive.
Mm-hmm. Those are so important aspects to look at after a broken relationship, because we often feel, and I'm going to say we because I've been there, we often feel broken ourselves, or some part of us is broken after we've been in relationships that have been particularly controlling or abusive. And so seeing our way clear through that and into another relationship is a really important time.
Yeah, definitely. And so one of the things that came up, I interviewed Lundy Bancroft a little while ago, and he's an abuse specialist. He works mainly with men, but he's an advocate for women. And one of the questions that I asked him, which was a question from the audience actually, was, so many times we see that we're reading about women like us and how we'll go back to men in relationships that are unhealthy and abusive. And I just asked him a little bit about that, and was really, really happy to hear and relieved to hear that that's definitely not always the case, and that if a woman is aware of her situation and she has, kind of taken that time to heal and dig deep and really look at what it was about her that maybe made her make those choices, and what are some things that she can do to protect boundaries and be, a little more guarded, because oftentimes women are in these situations are quite open and empathic and forgiving. So that was great news, but I'm really wondering if you can explore with us some of the things that we should look for, either within ourselves or within the next, that person who we see. Like, what should we do to guide ourselves in that next relationship?
Well, one of the things that I really like to think about is what we need as human beings in the way of relationship, because there's no question that we need close relationships. We need partnership. There's a lot of research that shows that when we can develop security in a pair relationship, that life goes better. And so there's some intrinsic needs that we have for that. And I kind of like to break it down into what I call the ABCs, just a simple little acronym around what we need in relationships. So I think about A for acceptance, and this is kind of on the emotional level. B for a sense of belonging, a we-ness, a togetherness. C for comfort, that we can turn to someone. They have our back. We can go to them in times of trouble and be comforted, have contact, have touch, have a sense of connection. And then S, safety, that we really need emotional safety to be seen, be ourselves, and that would go for physical safety as well. But even on the emotional level, that I can open up and not be shot down for that. So I think about those ABCs, and then getting to know what needs are most hard for me to claim. And you can look at your history, your relationship history, and the things that you yearn for, because we'll have oftentimes kind of an unmet need around these ABCs. One or two of them may stand out more to us than one or two of the other ones. And so it's important for us to know kind of our own combination of what we're needing for and looking for in relationship, and what's been most unmet in our life, because that then becomes a very vulnerable spot for us, and someone can come along and sweep us off our feet like, I'm getting so much attention and I feel seen, and that can bring up some blind spots for us, because if we have kind of these big unmet needs, then someone can come in and we may miss some other parts of our needs that would bring some balance into the relationship.
So in essence, are you saying that because we maybe had this emptiness or this longing that's suddenly filled because we haven't maybe taken the time to look at the other things? I
like the way that you're saying that about the suddenly, because I think when we're in emotional pain, a relief that comes in quickly, we can have that experience of like, this is it now, because we have this soothing experience, and that we may think that that's foundational to a healthy relationship, but that suddenness of that coming in actually may be a bit of a warning sign for us.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, when let's say that I really have felt a lot of loneliness, a lot of aloneness, and so that sense of I'm not together, I'm not together with someone. I don't have my belonging needs met. I'm not in a team, and I feel like I'm doing everything on my own. And someone comes along and wants to be with a lot and sees me a lot and maybe offers a lot of help. Then I may ignore safety needs. I may ignore how do I feel accepted? Can I actually look to this person for comfort when I'm afraid? So the balance can get tipped. And that leaves us, and then when that balance gets tipped in the relationship, we're more likely to get into a relational dynamic that ends up being lopsided and painful.
That makes total sense. Yeah. So what would someone do to avoid that? I mean, obviously, like you said, the suddenness is one of the things that maybe would be the tip off, but what are some other things? Like, let's say the person is a good person and there is true potential there. So is there a way to maybe slow it down or?
So one thing that we can do is to make sure that we have a good support network, so that most of those needs are being met. Of course, we can't get all our intimacy needs met, through friends and support. It's really helpful to have a breadth of support and to have people that we do trust, because it's often hard to really trust ourselves when we're entering new relationships after very difficult relationships. So, for example, I can remember coming out of a particularly difficult relationship that was fairly emotionally abusive and at times physically abusive, and then dating and being with who is now my husband, starting to date him and feeling so unsure of myself.
Right.
And being able to go to someone who knew me over the years and say, I don't trust myself. This feels good, but one of the impacts of being in a very difficult and abusive relationship is that because it felt good at one point, before the relationship goes bad, that we end up trusting or mistrusting our own judgment, our own ability to see. And so having extra support around that. And if I hadn't had kind of some support who said, well, actually, he's a good guy, I know him, or I've also seen him in other relationships and he's a good guy. That was really important for me, because I also had to redevelop my sense of trust in myself along the way. And so having a good support network is really important, so that some of those needs around, I could open up and cry. I could look for comfort in other places. I could say, am I keeping healthy boundaries? Is it going too fast? I had people around me who were a safety net for me. And that's really important, that we do that as we're healing.
Right. I like that a lot. And I think it's tough, because if you are, and this is why timing is probably the biggest question, because when you're getting out of a relationship that's been abusive and usually quite isolating, then you may have this attrition where people who were your close friends have fallen by the wayside, either, due to the situation you were in or the aftermath, when, all the friends divide and choose sides, and you find out who your real friends are. So that just speaks to the issue of timing. You need to rebuild new relationships, or reconnect with the people who knew you as you were when you were healthier and happier, maybe, and really leverage that and try to become, your best sense of yourself, and get to that place where you feel more whole. Timing doesn't always work that way. You might meet somebody before you're maybe even really ready. So it's so nice to have somebody there where you can say, okay, I need you to be my eyes and ears. I'm going to check in with you,
Yes. And so we can kind of slow ourselves down and slow the journey down and focus on the healing a little bit more. I really like some of the research that we have now, when we like fMRI brain scans, and some research that points to our emotional pain, hurt, like that it registers in the brain the same place as physical pain.
Okay.
So coming out of a broken relationship, especially one where we were, really hurt or abused in it, is painful. And it takes, you wouldn't go to, say, have a broken leg and expect that you're going to be able to run a marathon, or even, kind of do that without support. And when we're thinking about going back into a long-term romantic relationship, that's a long-term process, and we need to be prepared for the length of that. And so getting really kind of healed and in shape, and as you say, being a better version of ourselves, knowing what our weaknesses are so we can buff up some of those and have the extra support, is really very important in the healing process.
Yeah, that's great. And so I guess the other question I have is because these abusive relationships can be kind of complex, sometimes it's just a woman alone, and, she's kind of made it her way through and out the other side, and there aren't children involved. But sometimes there are children or property or, whatever. And so there's still a connection to that other person. Do you have any advice on how to navigate that aspect of it, like explaining the dynamic and what it was and how it
might still be this tenuous and perhaps even unsafe situation, while and that may never go away until your children are off to college or something. So,
yeah. Well, it's when there's a relationship imbalance that leads to finally a woman having to get out and in a protected sort of a way, then to come back and try to set limits and be safe and watch out for the kids or not and kind of carry on in some way that's different is a really big challenge. Because those safety measures weren't able to, she wasn't able to create those during the life of the relationship.
Right.
And so that is expected to be a challenge. And again, I think extra support is very helpful for that. I think doing a lot of things in public is helpful because we have then social support around us for bad behavior to be more contained. One of the concepts that I really loved when I was going through a breakup and there was still a lot of emotional intensity between me and my ex was this idea when I of course had been doing a lot of reading and studying. It was before I was doing relationship counseling myself. And I came across, I wish I knew who the author was, but there was a concept about being emotionally divorced, not just separated, and that what that looks like. And there's a lack of energy, a more of an apathy. There's less intensity because even really negative emotion can bind us to someone else.
It's true.
So I started to pay attention to releasing or giving up, unlatching from, what he may or may not do, bringing in that extra supports, creating spaces where if like the kids had to be dropped off back and forth, or if something like that is happening, that you're also changing the environment in a way to support what you weren't able to create during the relationship.
Right. I like that. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I always am a big fan of the public aspect that you mentioned and just, neutral spaces so that there's, more safety and both emotional, physical, whatever. I just think that makes more sense. And the dynamic is definitely different in a public space.
Yeah, creating a different dynamic is really important. And so knowing how we got caught in a particular dynamic or what our part of the dynamic is even afterwards, like maybe going along for too long until we couldn't tolerate it anymore. Like knowing that, that's something that I do. I may try to please too much, go along too much, and then I end up kind of getting squashed. Who I am gets lost in that kind of going along space. So recognizing that and then working to not go along, like speak up earlier and softer. Much sooner before it's way down the road where I'm kind of fighting for my life and then things get very escalated.
Right.
So knowing those, understanding that about ourselves and then making some affirmations around doing those things different and even just like not tolerating the bad behavior is really important to do, like getting off the phone and somebody starts getting escalated with you. Many of us, and myself included, I can remember the days when I would say, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to hang up on you now, while I was getting blasted, And I felt so bad and ashamed for being like rude. Right?
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So we have to be aware of and take little steps towards like getting ourselves out of those and creating a different situation.
Right.
So that we can so that we can step up sooner.
That's really smart. Well, so now I'm really intrigued, Becca. So what is your story? So I didn't even know that you had this story of abuse in your life. And so did that impact why you chose to become this relationship expert coach?
Not consciously, actually. I I'm sure it all dovetailed together in some way, but I was helping. I was a natural therapist, counselor. People came to me because I was a good listener. And so that had always been throughout my life. And my mom was way into self-help, and I never was a nonfiction reader. She had self-help books all around. I was always interested in people and psychology.
Right. That's awesome.
And people just came to me. My friends were always asking me advice, and I was always like going to the library and picking up another book to go, oh, well, I wonder what they should do in this situation.
Oh, that's great.
And then I had a friend who was in a very, very physically abusive relationship. And I started to go to the library to find out about abusive relationships, because she was like getting black eyes and getting throttled, and it was very, very physically abusive, very, very dangerous situation. And I started to realize that if I was going to I needed to know what I was talking about. So that kind of propelled me to go to go back to school. And but I really wanted to help children. So I started helping children. I became a school counselor, started helping children. But for me, it felt like I wasn't helping children. I couldn't help them if the family dynamic wasn't changing.
Yeah.
So that just kind of moved me into working with individuals and adults. And my success rate was really poor at helping couples and helping families, really, mostly couples, which was pretty standard, actually. Probably people are, if they're not seeing a specifically trained couple therapist, that you just go to a general therapist who's trying to help you with a couple relationship, they're more likely to help you break up than to help you.
I've heard that.
So then I heard about, the form of therapy that I do now, and it just changed my practice so much that it was like, finally I found a way I could help children and families through this form of therapy. So I think that, there's probably some part of me that I didn't know how to save my own relationship, but really I think it was kind of saving the children that was driving me more than trying to help couples. But it certainly became a mission about helping couples.
Wow. And so what is the form of therapy that you found
It's called emotionally focused therapy, and it's a research-based model of couple therapy and family and individual therapy as well. And it very much looks at emotions and patterns, and it looks both within ourselves and then what happens between. So what patterns are, and sometimes we do get caught in repetitious patterns, like from relationship to relationship. But many times we shift patterns when we shift relationships. So that's the really hopeful part. And the other hopeful part is we can oftentimes shift patterns within relationships if they haven't gone on too long and there's not too much damage. So, it's pretty hopeful as far as couples who come in a little bit earlier when there's not, when there's some pliability around change with both partners.
So I guess my ears are perking up because I'm sure that there are going to be some women listening to this thinking, oh, well, maybe that's the kind of therapy that we need. And if we just have that kind of therapy, maybe we can make it through. So do you see many, I'm mostly just referring to verbally and emotionally abusive relationships, do you see them transform under this method?
We do see a lot of transformation when it's verbally and emotionally abusive relationships, or what we'd, call that.
Okay.
So we do see a lot of success with that. And although we would also be looking for, safety factors, and are both partners willing, coming to it takes involvement from both.
Yeah.
But the therapy itself can help a lot of couples either heal their relationship within the relationship, or heal enough to kind of safely get out of their relationship.
Okay.
And kind of know which way they want to go without it being under duress, for example.
Nice.
So it wouldn't be necessarily that we're going to try to save every relationship. We're going to try to see what that dynamic is. And sometimes we are working, like I'm working with a couple, and that dynamic is so painful that, we often have mixed feelings. We don't get in long-term relationships wanting to get out of them.
Right.
That's usually not our intention. So, but you can, through this kind of therapy, really determine, is it going to be safe for me? And when the therapist helps us slow things down and look at the pattern that we're caught in and look at the dynamic, can I really risk trusting? Can I risk again? Can we feel the love and safety again? And so that going through this model of therapy, that would help someone kind of decide if there's potential for that to heal, and if it's worth the risk.
Right.
Lots of times it's not worth the risk.
I like that. And so is this form of therapy, and you do refer to it as EFT, it's different than tapping.
Yeah, that's right. It's emotionally focused therapy. It is referred to as EFT. It's the other EFT.
So if I'm asking because if somebody's Googling a therapist and they want to go, and maybe their partner is willing to go, just want to make sure that they end up with the right type of EFT.
That's right. It's emotionally focused therapy for couples, and we have a certification program around that, and you can find very well-trained therapists, and it's really a psychology. It's not an energy-based, it's a psychology-based, research-based. We've got 30 years of research behind it.
Wow.
It's the most effective form of couple therapy that's available. Like 75% what we'd call a cure rate from distress to happy, and about a 90% improvement rate.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. I hadn't heard of it yet.
Of course, we would also, some relationships I wouldn't see some couples in couple therapy because there's not enough of a safe foundation to begin couple therapy with. So there are some things that might rule out even beginning that kind of therapy for some couples, but a lot of distressed and even highly distressed couples were able to help.
So when you say that, are you referring to emotional safety, physical safety, or both?
Emotional safety, yeah. Emotional safety.
And
certainly physical safety, we would, that's generally a contraindication for couple therapy.
Right, that makes sense. So some people don't really know what that means, emotional safety. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, if we can create it in the room, lots of couples are not safe with each other outside, because these really, volatile dynamics get going on, where there's a lot of criticism and contention and contempt, very painful things that happen. And so that is standard with distressed couples. So what we're looking at is, if a couple comes in, we'll do an initial assessment, and can I, as the therapist, create safety in the space, emotional safety? Can I manage the session? Can I slow the couple down? Will both partners be able to kind of begin to own their steps in this negative cycle and this negative dance? And so we'll be looking at things that will tell us, can we proceed with couple therapy, or would we recommend individual therapy, or would we maybe not even recommend, the couple. I would never not recommend, I wouldn't typically recommend someone to split up or to stay together. I don't really see that as my job. I will help people kind of figure that out by looking at the dynamics between them and offering support for them to understand what where they are and, what the potential is for them.
Oh, that's great. I like that a lot. And so if this is 30 years of research behind us, would you say that in terms of finding therapists across the nation or even the world, that this is something that would be easy or kind of a little more difficult to find in a therapist?
It's improving all the time. There's an international center. It's called the International Center for Excellence in Emotionally Focused Therapy that has a Find a Therapist website. On the website, it has a Find a Therapist locator.
Okay, great.
And of course, people could contact me. I've trained people around the world. I train therapists around the world, and there's several many trainers around the world. So we're probably training around 2,000 therapists a year.
Wow.
And it's growing, and because it's award-winning and research-based, that many couples are finding it and asking for it. So, kind of from the grassroots up, people are looking for therapists who know how to do this because the research is so good on it. Mm-hmm. So you can, most of the major cities, you can find a therapist and many of the outlying areas. And we also have people who will do, in most of the major countries, you can find an emotionally focused therapist, and some people are able to do it via Skype. We have workshops for couples to come to, so you could maybe do a weekend workshop. I do a lot of workshops for couples to kind of help them get started, and you can also couples can do intensive therapy. So like I live in Mexico, and couples will fly in and see me, and we'll spend a week and see how far they can get in healing their relationship or maybe get out of crisis. So there's ways to try to access those services if they're not right around you.
Nice. That's great. That's very encouraging. Wow. It sounds like you're sort of healing relationships yourself. You have this mission as a trainer. It's just fabulous. I mean, I think in the time that I've been, working on this podcast and going through some of my own experiences, and I have a vast library of self-help books myself. Mm-hmm. I started at about age 12, actually. My mother sounds like your mother.
Yes, we were right in the same area.
Exactly. So, I just think that's wonderful. And I think what I'm wondering about is, in the field of, verbal emotional abuse, there's often this categorization of the abuser as maybe being a narcissist or a sociopath or having borderline personality disorder. And I'm just wondering if you see those types of things as obstacles, or if, it seems like a big chunk of the population fall into the narcissist category.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, there's ways that we categorize people that perhaps aren't particularly helpful. They're useful because they give us kind of a framework to understand what's going on and language around that. But I think people that are in pain cause pain for other people.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the intention behind that. So we'll often look at, my perspective as a therapist is that people, we are meant to grow, to heal, to become more, and to be in relationship. That we're relationally based organisms as humans, that we need that social acceptance, and we need comfort and teamwork and all of that. So, there's reasons that people end up hurting other people. And so therapy, I think, does better. I do better as the therapist when I'm looking for what causes the pain than trying to label the behavior.
I like that. Yeah. That's much more hopeful than just strictly labeling and, kind of pushing somebody into a box.
Mm-hmm. It's helpful if you're trying to get out of something and you need a way out, because many times we don't trust our own experience to just go, wow, this hurts so much. And I need more safety. So I'm, going to make sure that I can get extra support and get extra safety. And so we may move into, you're bad and you're doing these awful things. And so that helps us that helps us distance, right? There's a way that when we kind of can move out of our pain and into our head and categorize or label or judge, that it helps us kind of objectify the other, and it's a distancer. And sometimes we're in so much pain, there's like, that's the only way we can see out of it, is to, villainize what's been happening. And of course, many bad things happen in relationships. So the behavior can be really, really bad. But again, I think it often comes from when we are in pain that we can really hurt others.
Right. I like that. So part of the emotionally focused, is that what it is again? Sorry.
Yeah.
So the emotion part of that. So are you working on healing some of that emotional pain in both of the people, and then helping them to kind of reveal that, heal it, see it in each other, acknowledge it, and move forward together?
Yeah, that's a really pretty good summary of it. One of the things that happens is our brains are made to alert for danger.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm in a relationship and I feel misunderstood and my feelings get hurt, of course our feelings always get hurt in close relationships, because this is Sue Johnson, who's the founder of this form of therapy, would say you can't really dance in close proximity without stepping on each other's toes. Right. So of course our feelings are going to get hurt. But one of the things that happens is, you were talking about filters a little bit earlier.
Yes.
One of the things that happens is our brains are made to generalize to keep us safe, to protect us. And so if I've been hurt, I'm going to be watching for that kind of hurt again to avoid that sort of pain.
Right.
And then what often happens with couples is, if I need connection with you, but you also look dangerous to me, then the things that brought us together, like the risks that we would take to be close and to feel understood and to be seen by each other, we start putting up protective walls and it just happens where we start to generalize. Mm-hmm. So we'll see, oh, you did that, or you yelled at me about that, and that hurts, and that reminds me of some other time that either you did that or someone else did that. And now when I need closeness from you, I don't trust it. And that generalization of fear that our brains just kind of automatically do in an unconscious way to protect us, then begins to distance us from really having our needs met. And it can create a really bad interactive pattern, between us, because when we're needing closeness and we can't get it, then that's like the most dangerous thing initially to us as a human being.
Right, yeah.
And then I'm not getting the closeness, but now not only am I getting the closeness, you're actually turning and hurting me when I'm afraid. And so what we do is start to make some of that unconscious conscious, and look at the pattern. So it's a tricky therapy because we're looking both what happens really deep on the inside that's mostly unconscious, and starting to explore those fears and those unmet needs, and then how that translates into how we behave, protect ourselves, distance, or protest the ways that we get disconnected. So that's really a way that we can begin to heal too, even on our own, when we get out of bad relationships, to begin to look at, because what we have control over and responsibility for is our own reactivity, our own responses, and finding ways that we can operate in the world and heal and have our needs met. So that kind of looking at, what do I do when I'm afraid that you're going to turn and attack me, and it may just start with little snarky comments between a couple before it escalates, to higher degrees. So it's beginning, like for me to begin to, we know journaling is really helpful in healing emotional wounds, making things more conscious. So as we go through the kind of that self-discovery and, where we do or don't keep safety up, or where we get triggered. I mean, I don't know where you are at in the current relationship, but I certainly remember going back into relationships and my partner just coming up and hugging me in a particular way, and it would trigger, oh no, this memory from a former relationship that says, oh, are you going to be the same way now? Because, it's reminding me, and my brain will naturally do that. Like bring up those similarities as a way to go, danger, danger.
Exactly. It's like the ghosts of your past kind of creeping in.
That's right. And so like understanding that about ourselves, we'll have those little signals of places that we need to heal. We need to pay attention to those.
Yeah. And I think, I've had this conversation with a friend about those feelings, and I guess my feeling, and I don't know if this is in line with what you're doing, but it's like if you are able to feel safe enough to say, like, for example, how you felt with that hug, like, oh, this is triggering something for me. I'm going to be okay, but I need to talk about it. And it's like just shining a spotlight on it and having that feeling be accepted by your partner can really, I think, extinguish some of that, that pain that's coming up, or that shadow, ghost, whatever you want to call it.
Hugely. Right. That's so helpful, because when you expose that, then you see, oh, are you, whoever you're talking to, are you able to see me and see my fear, and is that acceptable? Right. Which brings a lot of comfort. Or how do you, as my partner, then respond to that? Do you blame me? Do you feel like, oh, I did a bad thing, now I shouldn't approach you in that way? It helps you kind of see a dynamic that may or may not start, so that if you can open up and share it, that's really counterintuitive, though, to put the spotlight on it and to open it up, because that's risky. That's stepping right into the vulnerability, but that is the kind of strength, and that kind of risk is really what helps us create stronger bonds and determine safety.
Right. Good. Well, I'm glad my instincts were right on that.
So it creates healing. Those pains that are created in hurts that are created in relationships are healed in relationships, and they're not really things that we heal by ourselves.
Right. And I just think that acceptance is just such a beautiful thing. I've just learned to really like just that word, acceptance. And I don't mean acceptance of negative things that hurt other people, but just accepting another person's pain or their story, or whatever it is that they're identifying, and being vulnerable with you, sharing is huge. I mean, that's how you build intimacy, and I think it's how you move forward.
Yes, I was talking to a therapist at a training event I was doing a few days ago, and he said something like, I think, because even as therapists, we struggle with these kinds of concepts in our own relationships. He said, I think we all just need a year of empathy training. We want to fix it. We want to fix other people. We don't know how to kind of reach over and be with someone in their pain.
Yeah.
And, I think that empathy for ourselves and for other people's pain, and just as you say, that is accepting. Like, oh, I see your pain, and I'm sad you have pain, and it's okay with me that you have pain,
right?
Because I trust that as you share the pain with me, it's actually going to help you heal.
Right, and the other person
helps us be closer.
Right, and the other person triggering it, obviously they have no idea that what might trigger you, so it's certainly not their fault or anything like that. And so if that piece is somehow kind of
cast aside, because people do kind of blame themselves when another person starts to feel bad or hurt or wounded or whatever. I think that can make a big, big difference. Probably easier said than done. So.
Well, one of the things that you said, it's a tricky practice, but it's a really beautiful thing to do. And one of the things that you said is the way you put a spotlight and share it. You're saying to, your partner or who you're dating, the person across from you,
Mm-hmm.
This brought up something for me. You're not saying you touched me in a way that, took me back.
Right.
So there's a way about self-disclosure that becomes really important in safety for self and safety for other, right?
Right.
It reminds me a little bit of the work of Dr. Kristen. It reminds me a little bit of the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who does research and presentations on self-compassion.
Okay.
And she has a beautiful website too, and some self-scoring questionnaires around just this idea of self-acceptance and self-compassion, for recognizing our own pain and our own needs, and treating ourselves nice around that, treating ourselves as our own friend,
right?
And being compassionate that we have pain. Like those are pretty important things too on the healing journey.
Right. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's great. Wow, this has been so helpful. And so I will definitely, we'll figure out how to include Dr. Kristen Neff's information. And then what's the best way for people to look for you online, reach out to you in other ways? Like we'll also put this in the show notes, but feel free to mention.
Sure. Well, I have a couple different websites, RebeccaJorgensen.com, but that's really largely, there is a place on there for couples to go to and find my other blog. That's kind of the place where the therapist would go, to RebeccaJorgensen.com. But I have another website called livinginlove.us, like .us, that I have a blog and about workshops for couples and couple information. That's helpful. Helpful to couples, or even to individuals, to kind of start to understand, looking at their own recovery.
Right. That's great. Well, this has been so eye-opening and so refreshing, really. I have to say, so glad I had you on. Seriously.
Well, I just think there's so much hope,
Yeah.
Even getting out of bad relationships and being able to be in a good, healthy, secure, happy relationship. It's totally doable and possible. I'm 20 plus years now in a very happy relationship. Nice. And after, being a couple of times around the block in really difficult relationships. And so I think if I can do it, anybody can kind of do it.
I love that. Yeah, and it's a good testament to the rest of us that even somebody in your profession can struggle with these things, because that's something that comes up a lot too. Like, oh, well, why did she stay? Or how come she didn't see it? Or, happens even to professionals, right? You just sort of
yes, absolutely. I do a lot of workshops for therapists and their partners, because therapists have difficult times as well. And I'm really glad to be on the end where I kind of know both ways now, both the pain of the breakup and the recovery, and bad relationship as well as good relationships, because I think it really is very hopeful for healing. And me and my husband, it wasn't always easy, we had to learn how to really be with each other as well. So relationships take work, but they're so worth it, and we need them. So learning how to be a good partner and to be with a good partner, I think is, we don't often grow up knowing how to do that. So
right, exactly. Yeah. And so one quick thing, this is not a great exit question, but I just did promise that I would ask one of these questions, and we already talked about filters and relationships. So the tail end of that question that was sent in by a listener was, what are 3 questions you would ask someone in the beginning of a relationship to find out if they're capable of having a long-term healthy relationship?
What I hear first is, I'm really scared. I'm really scared to enter a relationship, and I want kind of I want a formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an important thing just to notice, that can I even tell right off the bat around somebody or not?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think that can be helpful for people to look at is, there's a body of literature on attachment style, on the ways that how we respond when we're afraid. Do we kind of move into blame or criticism or anxiety, or do we move away from relationship and emotionally kind of close down? And so knowing our own kind of style for moving around in relationships can be really helpful, and knowing someone else's. Right. Or being able to determine someone else's can also be helpful as well. So I would want to, one thing is, there's no instant answers. Right. So I'm going to notice that just the idea of wanting 3 foolproof questions would say it's really scary, and look inside for the answers rather than looking outside to the other. How do you feel? Can you open up? Are you willing to take some risks with that person? Take little risks, and do they respond when you take little risks? Do you feel like you have to take really big risks to get their attention? And if you do, that's probably kind of a warning sign for you. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that you have to go along and placate and not be yourself with them? So I'd more look at, what 3 questions can I ask myself when I'm with that person to know whether I'm being authentic, and whether I can feel safe, and not, we're going to be scared whenever we're entering something new. But do I feel like I have to really take a really big risk to be seen? Or can I take it at a pace that feels comfortable, and take little risks that I feel like I'm still responded to? Right. Or, do I feel like I'm getting rejected a lot, or talked over, or unseen? So I think that'd be the 3 questions would be, what can I ask myself to evaluate how I felt after being with that person?
Okay. I like that. And it sounds like the self-scoring, the Dr. Neff's self-scoring might be helpful for the person who asked that question to kind of figure out, I don't know how you worded it, the self-love aspect of that.
Yeah, I think we can be so hard on ourselves, and of course there's going to be a stage of healing when we really don't trust ourselves, and we feel worthless coming out of really abusive relationships. We can feel really like failures and kind of worthless and unloved. And so, working on that part of it, and that's just a stage. As long as we're doing things that help us heal, that will pass. We can move out of that into something that we feel better about ourselves in, and we can check in and tune in and appreciate our own, who we are, and our own, needs and desires.
That's great. That sounds like good homework for all of us. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this, Becca. This has been, like I said, it's been an eye-opener and absolutely just inspiring in the most positive way. We could use a little bit of that light. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and for what you're doing to help so many women in recovering and moving on to find new relationships and really finding their voice. It's so important that we each have a voice, and it's so important that we find and use it. We're we're what we have, at the end of the day, who we are is so important. So
Right.
I love that you have that message, that you're sending that message.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, great. Well, thanks again. You take care.
Thanks. All my best to you and all your listeners.
Thank you.
The Audacious Life. Find peace and break free. Get 3 key things that will help you begin healing from abuse. Download them for free at theaudaciouslife.com. Steph welcomes you to join her social circle on Twitter at The Audacious Life, Facebook.com/The Audacious Life,